Welcome to Ladies Get Paid, the podcast and newsletter where I coach real women through real challenges at work and in life. In today's episode, we dive into a topic that's becoming increasingly common yet rarely discussed: moving back home as an adult professional. My client is a recent master's graduate who's chosen to move back home in her 30s, but she's grappling with something I think a lot of us face: how to honor our personal values while maintaining career momentum, how to juggle your adulthood, but also being back home in that family structure. What I love about this conversation is how it challenges the traditional narrative of success. We explore how to turn what society might view as a step back into a strategic move forward. We tackle everything from managing and maintaining long distance professional relationships to translating academic work into compelling content for a potential job. And perhaps most importantly, how to quiet those voices, both internal and external, that can question our choices. Whether you're considering a similar move, navigating a career transition, or simply trying to balance personal values with professional growth, this conversation offers practical strategies and what I think is a fresh perspective on creating success on your own terms. Let's dive in.
So I'm in my 30s, I'm a recent graduate, and I'm moving home by choice. And I think I'm navigating this new phase in my life and also a new journey, a new milestone coming back. And I think there's a lot of stigma and reservations that people look at me when I say that it's like my choice and I'm excited to move home. And I care about my family and I miss my family dearly, being away from my program. And I think when I ask this question, what that can look like for me is like, how can I maintain my stamina and the independence and everything that I want to do to continue developing myself and not feeling that just because I'm moving back home, I'm like putting a pause on myself or detrimenting my career journey or anything like that, which I don't think that, but I feel like I have that feeling that others have judged me for saying something along those lines, especially in my 30s, moving back home. And I know it's a privilege that I get to do that choice. And so I'm just trying to balance all those things and trying to get more clarity on that. And the kind of what I was thinking about when I asked that question.
Yeah. Okay, so my style is often to ask you a bunch of questions. So I turn it around. I know you came to me for answers, but I'm going to actually look to you for your own answers. And then we're going to build hopefully an action plan from there. Okay, so you say that when people judge you or express things that seem to indicate a judgment on moving back home, you say that you don't believe them. But it's obviously bothering you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be wasting your energy thinking about it or even bringing it up to me. So, if we're going to be brutally honest with ourselves and each other right now in this moment, what would it be like to have those feelings of judgment about yourself?
To have those judgments about myself.
Yeah, you say that you don't have them, right? That it's other people putting those judgments on
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, do you also put them on yourself?
Yeah, I think a little, yeah, for sure, a little bit. I think when I hear other people thoughts about it, I'm like, wait, should I not? Type of question, like it like seeps into me and makes me wonder, like, why is that? And I think a lot about how like it took me a while to get to the place where I am excited and I know that's my choice and it's a very empowering thing to do, but it took me a while because I did feel all those reservations myself before sharing it more with my community. And I felt more of, oh, success after a graduate program is like getting a job right away or moving out and all these things. But during my grad program, I would eat dinner by myself and call my mom or something. And I think a lot about, does that what success look like? Having dinner by yourself or when I can just be with my community and family by choice and be. And so I think about that a lot. And I think for me, it's feeling like, how can I embrace that and hold myself? And also knowing going back home is not easy sometimes. There's a lot of pros and cons on each and everything. And so I'm thinking like, oh, how do I make sure I hold my boundaries when I'm being with family and around that too? But I think a lot about how it makes me feel like, and it's hard because I feel like I do, unfortunately, with like social media and how our society is put up, like I inevitably sometimes just compare myself to other people. And does that mean I'm in a different stage just because I'm choosing to move back home type of thing?
Something I've learned in my life is that when we can accept that there are multiple things that contradict each other that we
Yeah.
carry, instead of trying to pick one or the other, it's either empowering to move back home because I'm deciding to own my values and make a bold choice aligned with those values that may be different from societal values. And I'm also worried about it. It could breed complacency, or you'd mentioned encroaching on your boundaries, judgment from others, hurting your career. They're all true, and you carry all of them. And I think real maturity is not trying to choose one or the other, but instead creating a container, right? The ability to actually sit with it and then make action plans, which we'll do today, of anything that you are truly worried about. We'll talk about boundaries in a second because it's something you mentioned. What are specific things that we can do now to try at least? We can't ensure that it won't happen, but try at least to get ahead of it. And that way you're walking in eyes wide open. So for anyone who is debating making choices, there's no, I think, right or wrong choice here. It's just, is there a plan when you make that choice? So, first, I want to commend you for even knowing your values, right? Being able to identify and honoring your values that are specific to you, which is, I don't want to be at home alone eating this by myself, right? Family is important. I miss my mom. There's energy that I was already spending wanting to be with family. Why not actually just be with family? And to make that choice can be difficult if it's not what people around you are doing. But here's the thing that everybody wants, I think. We all want happiness. And to me, happiness comes from living in alignment with our values. You are doing that. So if we're going to compare ourselves to anyone else on social media, let's just follow different accounts now. If we start following accounts that are more about living in alignment with values, you're going to go, actually, I'm doing that. And I'm going to feel a lot better now. So wanted to mention that. Let's talk about your concerns, which are all quite valid here. You mentioned stamina, independence, fear of putting a pause on your career, boundaries. Out of all those things, and maybe some of you didn't mention, what is your greatest fear about moving home?
I think the stamina. My family lives in a little bit of a suburban area. There's not as much as like young professionals around me compared to living in cities that I've had before. And that just makes me think about how do I continue to stay connected? I also think that could be a different thing where I have to take more initiative, whereas when I was in cities, it was like a little bit more easier.
Yes, correct. Although you'll have a lot of joy and pride in being intentional. When something is difficult and you take the step anyway, you're going to feel so much better about yourself than if it just was in front of you. So, in a way, the challenge that you're going to have in moving home by creating a plan and following through on it may elevate your self-esteem even and also from that generate momentum. So I actually see a lot of opportunity in the challenge. So let's talk about stamina, and you defined it further in terms of being isolated, okay? Or the potential to be isolated, and then maybe from there to lose momentum, right? What do you think are some specific things that you can do proactively to try to protect yourself from that happening?
Definitely staying connected to like my friends, especially my cohort that I just graduated with, seeing what they're up to, what kind of things they're doing in that space.
All right, I'm going to
Um,
pause you right now because this is a good exercise because everybody listening is going, yep, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. And you keep going on the list. And that's true, but
yeah.
life happens, right? Things get in the way. So whenever we come up with an idea, let's pause and then say, what's the obstacle and foresee standing in our way? And let's
Oh,
make a plan around that because that's the reality of the situation. We're not living in aspirations. I mean, we are when we're delusional and that sort of feels good, but then life happens, reality hits, and we feel bad. The best way to bridge the gap, I think, between sort of the aspiration and the reality is living more in the obstacle in a way. So not focusing on what I'd like to achieve, but what is going to get in the way of that achievement. What do you think is going to prevent you or make it difficult to stay connected with friends?
I would say time difference. I have a time difference when I'm moving back to California, and then most of my friends who are in the same space in policy management with me are currently in DC on the East Coast. And then I think another obstacle is prioritizing time, to be honest. I feel like I love my family, but sometimes family things are spontaneous, it's not on the calendar. And so getting pulled to like certain things or events or commitments and trying to make sure, I think that's where the boundaries come up. I want to emphasize to my family, hey, I'm committing to meeting with a friend or having this chat or virtual coffee chats with people from LinkedIn or anything like that to be continuing to learn and exploring my network and extending that.
What do you think can make it as easeful? And notice I'm not saying easy because none of this is ever easy, but as easeful as possible to follow through or move through those very real obstacles. So you mentioned time difference and you also mentioned prioritizing.
For time difference, I think definitely putting things on the calendar and planning so they make sure that everyone, like, it's helpful for everyone's time zones or like it aligns with everyone's time zones.
Mhm. I also think it could be imagining connection in maybe a bit of a different way than you've done it so far, right? So if connection has been in person and now we need to shift it, what are ways in which we can make sure that we're at least still feeling connected? So if, let's say, in person it was we're having a coffee meetup, it could transfer to a virtual coffee, but that takes time to plan. People have to show up. There's a lot of energy involved, and then I see that as more opportunity to have obstacles get in the way. So one suggestion I might make is what are other ways, smaller ways that we can think of connection with friends? And how do we do that consistently? Is that resonating for you?
Yeah, it does. I think it's been really fun. Part of my program, I was also virtual, and I think a lot about my friends who were not in my program and just sending text messages, sending a FaceTime call, like updates to
Yep.
stay connected. And my friend just recently got me on Marco Polo, which is like a very new thing for me, just like a video voice message, like a video note instead of like a voice note.
Okay, cool. I love that. Yeah. Because just because something we were doing something in one way before, when we're now completely changing our environment, we might actually have to change the way in which we're defining connection, right? Or the thing that we seek. If it can no longer be exactly as it was, does that mean we don't have connection anymore? No, it just means we need to think differently about how we get to it. And I would urge you, and not just you, but everybody watching and listening, if there's something that you want, really want in your life, and you set out to achieve it or to integrate it, please, at the end of the day slash end of the week, reflect on, did you do it? And if not, that's okay. Just what got in the way. So for you, knowing that connection is something that's important to you, and we're going to have to be creative in how this is happening since you can't just walk down the street anymore and see a friend. At the end of the week, say, how much connection did I feel to the people in my life? Family being one, that's the easier one now because you're going to be home. But with friends, right? What did connection look like this week with them? Not much. Or, yeah, actually, it was good, but it took a lot of time and I'm not sure that can be sustained, right? So just have some kind of feedback loop for yourself where you are checking in on this thing that's important to you. But let's talk about boundaries and prioritizing here, right? Because getting pulled in different directions with your family, things being spontaneous, your home so that you can have that spontaneity. But let's try to imagine in the moment when, I don't know, you tell me, let's talk about quote worst case scenario for a second. Not that it's a worst case, but something that you're nervous about here happening. Give me the details of it. I'm talking like you're sitting in front of your computer and your mom just walks in the room. Like what exactly happens very specifically and tangibly that you think is going to get in the way of you maintaining momentum in your career or stamina?
It's actually tricky to think of the worst case scenario because I was working from home when COVID happened. I moved back home too before. So I felt good about telling my parents or my family, hey, I'm working at these hours. Try not to interrupt or keep text me if you need to contact me, thinking about that. And I think it just sounds like I just need to be very, I appreciate this reminder of being very more vocal in communicating like certain times when I'll be like, hey, I have this meeting or I have this set up or I won't be free during that time if something come up. I think the worst case scenario is like it's like someone's birthday party at my house and I have a call and I just have to step out for an hour or two and making sure like I hold myself that boundary because I think for me it would be unless depending on the context of the call, of course, I would want to move that call and just be more present with my family. But I think that's where I think about how I feel like that stamina part in a sense where it's always easier to like of course be enjoying time with family and friends and so I think I just have to think a lot about okay it's 1 hour to step away and then I can reconvene with everyone and I have to frame it that way I think for myself too.
In the moment, though, that's hard, right? So the way that you've expressed it
Yeah.
intellectually, this is lovely, right? And I agree. But in the moment, you're not thinking, you're feeling, and the feelings are going to be, I want to go out with them, or I'll feel bad if I say no, or you can tell me more specifically what the feelings are. What do you think that you'll be able to do in the moment to shift those feelings?
I think Probably thinking a lot about how I am grateful to have my family time, and I'm also excited to have this certain call
Mhm.
um, with this person that I'd be learning something new. And so if I can step away and make sure I remember that this call is on the calendar, I want to be respectful of that person's time and my time, and however that investment of that conversation could be. I think that will be helpful for me. And every time I do engage in these conversations, I do feel very excited because I have new knowledge or I have a new perspective that I have never had thought about before. So I think I would try really hard to think about that framing, like to your point.
And so when you said I'm going to try really hard, that takes energy. And I'm all about the easeful of this. So
Yeah.
everything you said has been great. I would just add to it, is there a way where you don't have to try so hard? And so just this is an example that might not work for you, but it would be like a sticky note, right? It would be there'd be some sticky note that you have a post-it that has an expression on it, or maybe it's a picture, or there's some kind of visual representation that reminds you of this boundary that you want to hold, right? So you don't have to go through the mental gymnastics of trying so hard. Okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, good. And also, this speaks to my earlier suggestion of having a practice of daily and weekly reflections. I want to be very clear. This is also counsel I give to myself all the time. And I'm very much a work in progress on this because I have kids and I work from home and I like really want to be with them and they're right outside my door. And I had to mute myself a second ago because one of them was crying. Like it takes everything to not
Yep.
rearrange my calendar constantly. Like you said, canceling a call, moving a call because I want to be with my kids. Like I'm in the same boat as you. I want to be clear about that. Something that's been helpful for me is instead of looking at everything as what did I do or not do in a given day, taking a step back and going, let's look at the whole week. Let's look at the last 2 weeks. Let's look at the month. Let's look at the quarter. And as long as I'm hitting certain benchmarks I've set out for myself, by the way, also re-examining those benchmarks to see if they're still working or not working for me is helpful. So in a given day, I may choose, you know what, I am going to reschedule these calls because I want to be with my family, because I've taken a step back and I've seen over the course of a week, I am doing enough calls to further a certain goal, right? So
Mhm.
that one call in that one day doesn't matter maybe as much as you think. It's taking a little bit of a larger lens, bigger perspective, and saying, in that week, in that month, what do these calls represent for me? And am I achieving that? Right? What's the purpose they're serving? And maybe that one call didn't matter that much because I'm actually doing quite a number of other calls. When I look at all of my time and energy, I've really allocated it properly to networking, learning new things. 20% of my time is going towards that. And changing that call didn't really make a difference. Now, if you keep doing it to all the calls, of course it does. But just to
Yeah.
not get so caught up in these one decisions, making sure that you've understood them in the context of a larger calendar as it's aligned with your values. Let me know how that resonated.
Oh yeah, 100%. That makes total sense. And it's so interesting that you brought up your kids by the door. My nephew used to be by the door when he would come over. And it was like break my heart. And I would love to come over out and play. But and I appreciate that perspective of looking at the bigger picture and like giving myself grace. That's what it sounded like a little. Give myself grace.
Mm-hmm.
And my family and the schedule grace. And of course, depending on the call and how often I would do it, of course. But I really appreciate that permission slash reframe of that too.
Great. Awesome. I love it. But talk to me about your career aspirations here, right? This concern you had about was putting a pause. Okay. So you talked about stamina. So that's to me sustainability, right? The ability to like keep going. Great. But putting a pause, it means you have a desire to move fast, right? You don't want to just hold it steady. You want to generate some momentum here. So what's the momentum you want to generate? And what are you doing to get there?
Ooh, that's a good question. I feel torn even like hearing this question because part of me is like trying to take a slow season.
Ah,
My grad program was like really intensive, and so I'm excited to take a slower pace in life, but also like how do I make sure I want to also still make movements, increment movements still while I'm in a slow season, both at the same time, if that makes sense. And so I'm trying to figure out the stamina as in wise where here I have friends who have like similar interests with me who would like, hey mine, maybe you should go to this event, or hey mine, like I'm doing this thing, which be interested in, or hey mine, this is what I learned recently, versus where I feel like back home, my community looks different. And so I just think about like how can I get myself involved in having that momentum of like community and network still to push me in a similar and continue to help me like grow in a career path, but also not too intensely, if that makes sense, trying to practice those things.
I feel like I was spot on in the way that we started when I said, I think the overarching theme for our conversation is how do you hold multiple seemingly contradictory things at once? Because you
100%.
really defined it well here, which is slow season, continuing to celebrate the preservation of energy while also generating energy movement. On its surface, those things do seem contradictory. I will admit that. However, I don't think they have to actually be contradictory. I think this is when we get into it's not just what you do, but it's how you do it. I think that it is possible to build really great momentum that does not burn you out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, all in the how we do it, right? So not just what you're doing, how you're doing it. So maybe talk to me about, and I'm making an assumption here, the kind of desire for the slow season, right? That was based off of the burnout before. What were some practices that you were doing that you think led to the burnout? Obviously, there were external pressures I know from school, but we want to focus on things we can control. So, what would be your quote worst fear now moving forward as it comes to burnout? Specifically, what can you imagine you doing that would lead to the burnout now that we want to avoid?
Okay, this is interesting. I
So,
feel
by the way, I'll interject. Obviously, the best way to think about the future, or the only way that any of us can think about the future, is reflecting on the past, because that's all we've known. So if it is helpful to think about what you just went through and you don't want to repeat, that might be fine. What can you imagine moving forward that you might do that will reach your goal of career momentum, but then make you fall short of your goal of celebrating the slow season?
Oh, okay. I guess for context, like my program was like super demanding and I had like fellowship side, like I had like a 30-hour job and I had to take classes. And so like that together just was really demanding in my time. So I think moving forward, hopefully looking to the future, I'm just thinking a lot about like maintaining a good balance of like work-life balance and how that could look like for me. I think right now I'm trying to like schedule like movement time, like gym time, like at least 3 times a week or something on my calendar and try to continue that habit. And then once things get maybe intense when a new job pick up or something like that, hopefully I can stay and continue that habit. And I think a lot about how I tend to do get excited and I sign up myself for a lot of things. Like I get interested in a lot of things, like a new club, a new hobby, whatever. And then I get overwhelmed I was like, oh, I just want a day to be an introvert. And I realized my future self or my past self schedule something on the calendar this weekend. I was like, okay, now I have to go to that and commit. So I think I'm trying to think a lot about how do I make sure I like give, my calendar like the action it needs, but also a day just to take a break and have nothing on the calendar too, which I also adore. I like love both things.
Again, this is all about holding contradictions at the same
Yeah.
time. So knowing that specifically you get excited, you commit to a lot of stuff, what is something that you can envision yourself doing or thinking that could help slow you down? So before you make a decision, what is going to be like the reflection process for yourself?
I think I would think about the trade-offs. If I'm committing to this thing this week, what is the trade-off? Or would I will be willing this week to sacrifice like a day of being an introvert? Or would I be okay with opting for an event this week or this month? I think we'll think a lot about that time. And I appreciate the framing that you provide earlier with zooming out, looking
Yes.
at the 2 weeks. Yeah. And I think I would do that better because I do that a little bit now, but not as intentionally. I go by a whim. Like, how do I feel? Do I think I would have energy to hang out every day of the week next week? And then I say yes or no. So I appreciate that to do it more intentional and thinking about the trade-offs of the timing that I would commit to on
Yeah,
things.
every decision we make has a sacrifice to it.
Yeah.
Everywhere we even put our attention, whether it's just spiraling thoughts, that's a sacrifice, right? It's taking energy away from other things. What amazing ideas do you think you could come up with if your mind wasn't spiraling in that other direction? So, energy is everything. I think writing out buckets of how you define slow season, we'll just say, and how you
Mm.
define career momentum. Because again, those are the two things that I feel like you came to me with. You want to maintain both of them. And
Right.
coming home is going to help with the slow season, but maybe hurt with the career momentum. What are buckets of ways in which you can define for yourself that if you fill these buckets, you will feel good? Meaning for the slow season buckets, maybe give me one or two things. I guess you already did because you said movement time. So great. Okay. What about career momentum? How will you know that you are continuing to generate that? What are the ways in which you can define career momentum for yourself very specifically so that at the end of the week and the end of the month, you're able to look at these buckets and go, how full is that bucket? Is there a way that we could make it a little bit fuller? Or maybe that's overfilling. Now we got to reduce some stuff. You tell me if you feel like we did it for the slow season energy stuff first,
Mm.
and then we'll move on to the career momentum. Happy to keep digging into the slow season if you feel like that might be a concern. I projected and assumed that it wouldn't be only because you're moving home, but you tell me.
No, I think that hits it on the nail. I think moving home does make it easier. Like a lot of the days would be not on the calendar with family things. So I do appreciate that. I think that sounds right with the slow season. I think for the career momentum side, I would feel I'm trying to think of like, it's interesting. I notice my brain's jumping to like KPI, like a number. Does it need to be like one coffee chat a month? And would that make me feel like a new like networking or I'm trying to engage in new conversations with people in my
Just start with the bucket and we'll put metrics on it later. I do
okay.
like where you're going with this because I'm
Okay.
all about getting as specific as possible. Just to be clear, we get specific and create structure so that there can be spontaneity, so that you can change your mind. You just need to have a framework so that we're even able to figure out what we're talking about here. Otherwise, in your own mind, you're just going to go off of in the moment how you feel. And that's not always telling you the truth of the thing, the whole picture. So I do like KPIs and we are going to put them on here if you'd like, but start with that coffee chat. Okay, great. Before we move on to any other things that might demonstrate to you that you are generating career momentum, I want us to stop and ask ourselves, coffee chat, why do they matter for career momentum?
Just for networking, I think that's helped me to be informed and learning from a colleague in the space. Either they're a manager, a director, where I could potentially see myself growing into, but just to continue to expand my network.
Okay.
And yeah, community.
It's also a lot of energy. Okay. So knowing that this is going to be a bucket that requires a lot of you, how do we make sure that you are not wasting your time in these networking experiences? So do you feel confident that you know how to strategically and efficiently network?
As of now, I've been like, I love virtual networking, especially on LinkedIn, sending people like a DM and connecting to people and like learning, especially their profile and learning about their career journey. So I think that's been helpful. And I think this maybe that KPI of one a month could be interesting because then it could also be like a piggyback conversation with like a mentor too. So it doesn't have to be like a new person every month. And I could see that being also really helpful and deepening that relationship. And also maybe going to like a new event around town that's like more happy hour for like professionals.
Love all of this. This should definitely be on your action plan. I also want you to add to it, though, not just are you showing up for these things, which is you spending energy. What about you receiving energy? Reflect on what are you getting out of this? It all sounds nice, but in reality, are these people actually providing you with helpful information? Are they providing you with helpful connections? Is it as one chat leading to another chat, right? Can they make introductions for you, right? So just make sure you also have built into this reflection process of, is this even working for me? So you make the plan, but it's not just checking it off your list. It's also continuing to ask yourself, am I getting more back than I'm even putting in? So that it doesn't burn you out, actually.
Oh, interesting. I love that. I
Because
never
that would
thought of
be my concern, right? Of these things that represent career momentum, which are correct things to do. They're all things I would suggest to do. But just know that as you're doing them, you're also reflecting on the energy you're giving versus the energy you're receiving, which can come in the form of being inspired, great, receiving information, getting an introduction, right? It doesn't have to always be so transactional, but just make sure you're not giving and giving and giving. You're receiving too. Coffee chats. Okay. What might get in the way of these networking or coffee chats or following through on it? What are going to be the obstacles that you can foresee coming up?
I think depending on, let's say, if I start a new job, how demanding that job is, like the first couple months could be tricky for me to expand that. But I also was thinking maybe this could be a part two of this too, was me having a job is part of the career momentum too,
Mhm.
and then investing in the job in a different way. So I think it's like interlaying each other a little bit.
In a given day, what can you imagine from the minute you move home? How can you hold yourself accountable to following through on finding a networking event, going, actually showing up to it, following up and following through with people? Again, this takes a lot of energy. It sounds like it comes naturally to you. So maybe you don't feel the energy that it takes from you, but it does. So when you're tired, you're not going to want to do it. So is there something that you can remind yourself that will make it more easeful to follow through?
I could see myself putting a calendar invite
Yeah.
almost once a month to just put something on the calendar in the
Yes.
future. So I think that way it could be like happening every month. That I
Right.
appreciate that prompt a lot.
Good, because that's again, that's the reality of life. It's not the aspirations, it's the obstacles. Okay, love that. Besides coffee chat, other things that will indicate to you that you are continuing to generate career momentum.
Yeah, this is like the second part. I was thinking like most likely landing a job. Since I'm a recent grad, like having a job will definitely like fulfill that bucket in a big and in a lot of ways, having career momentum and then investing a lot more in the job. If that means joining an affinity group at work or doing 10% above my role.
But we don't have the job yet, right?
No, we're currently
So,
looking.
so what does your current job search look like? So in a given day, in a given week, yeah, talk to me about the job search for a second.
So right now I'm currently really looking for opportunities in career social responsibility and philanthropy and a dash of government, but mostly focusing a lot on roles that are program officers, strategic partnerships manager. So I'm really looking for things that have a little bit more of that relationship side and hopefully a little bit, thread a little bit of my careers together. And so right now this week, it looks like I apply for jobs like at least five jobs about a week since my program's just been wrapping up. And yeah, I'm aiming for a lot of jobs that are remote and then also like back home.
Okay. Also takes a lot of energy that you're giving and not receiving because chances are you're going to get more rejections than you'll get yeses, correct? That's just a numbers game. So
Yes.
how do you make sure that you are giving yourself energy during this process of looking for a job?
That's a good question. I try to go to coffee shops so I can feel a little bit motivated to have the place because it's hard to stay focused. I notice applying for jobs because it's just like an ongoing thing. It's hard to feel like I'm at a quota, but I at least aim like one job. If that day I'm working on applying for jobs, at least applying for one job I'm really excited about. And then also trying to reach out to more folks on LinkedIn, try to get that referrals. It is very hard also with the economy and everything that's going on to get an interview back. Yeah.
How do you not feel, how do you not, just like, how do you keep your spirits up?
I think I'm excited to contribute everything that I've learned from my program and my experiences to a team. And so I feel like that's my goal too, like recognizing that. And also like I have been unemployed before. So I know like it's a sticky situation, it's messy, it's like a job within a job, looking for a job.
Mm.
I actually just had an informational interview with someone last week and they remember 2 months ago, they're exactly in the same bucket as me.
Yeah.
And they were like, it's very hard. And they remind me that too. And it's just validating. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to give myself break, like not every day job hunting, like some days taking a day off and trying to remember like I have a life right now and it's things outside of it and not just a job hunt.
Yeah, I think there's a way that you can. So you talked to me about seeking connection or wanting to maintain connection with people.
Yeah.
And you also talk about wanting to get a job. I think there's a way that you can combine both, which is really connect with other people who are also looking for work. Connect with people who are in your profession, which you're doing, but being able to commiserate with where you're currently at. Because if we wait to get the job to feel like we have momentum, then that means right now we don't feel good. Right now is our life. This is it. So I want to make sure that you're able to at least continue to self generate career momentum, regardless of if you get a yes or not. And you're smart. You figured that out already in terms of the networking, but that's only one way to define it. Let's try to figure out all different kinds of ways in which we can define career momentum that we have a say in, that does not require anyone else to accept us for a job. I'm going to throw out some examples of what I mean, and you tell me if any resonate and what ideas that you're getting. So I define career momentum as, for example, continuing to hone clarity, what lights us up, the purpose that we have, being able to contribute to projects. You might hear that and go, that's why I want a job. No, we can't wait till we get the job to do that. So, what are things that we can do now? Example, volunteer, right? Or is this startup? Or is there somebody you can pitch your services that you're not looking for a full-time job, but it's in a sort of fractional capacity at a subsidized price point so that you can get a yes more quickly? Are there case studies, the projects that you worked on at school, right? Are there things that you can create for yourself and put online? You will say this was not for a real client, but you're going to be able to exercise that muscle that you want to be hired for. Let's do it now. Things like being able to better articulate who you are and what makes you wonderful and the service that you provide. Are we getting better at that? You're applying for jobs, but if you're not getting a yes, are you spending some effort getting perspective on what you're putting out in the world? Can we make a website? I just want us to think as creatively and as expansively at what momentum can look like for ourselves that we have a say in. Tell me what you're thinking and feeling based off of all of that.
This completely resonates. I felt like I really appreciate this a lot. I like floated my hair like consulting and like I used to do freelancing. So I really appreciate these like other ways to be creative, to think about. Yeah, because I think the hard part about not having a job is not feel like I'm contributing to society or
Right.
contributing that way.
Yeah.
So I think this is really helpful for me. I may or may not been wanting to have a little website. And so this is like also a great project to have. Thank you for seeing that. Yeah. And I thought a lot about branding myself. Like I have a capstone, a thesis. How can I like share that more on LinkedIn and showcase more of my work in that way that you're saying, like in a case study?
Talk to me about your capstone. We mentioned energy. You spent a lot of energy on that, spent a lot of money on that. Let's make use of it. So, what was the subject?
It was about transforming workforce development in career sponsors apprenticeships, so on the job training, and it calls for private and public partnerships. So how do public and private people, companies and community partners, nonprofits, private industries come together and create an on-the-job training where people can get an education paid and get the job training and then also walk away with all the experience and have hands-on training?
Phenomenal. You should be the expert in this. And the way to become the expert is to study it, which you did, and also to publicly generate a body of work. So I would encourage you with some next steps here and a good little project is really dissect your case or your capstone and see how you can cut it up into as much content as possible that you share on LinkedIn. To me, this is what's going to get you the job. I think it's putting things out in the world that brings value and the right audience will attract itself to you. You're also being proactive with your networking, but I think they're going to connect with you over your content. You're going to tag them. You're going to encourage people to tag their friends. You're going
Mhm.
to why don't you do a live with somebody? Get on LinkedIn Live with a professor of yours or a person you network with and say, this is going to be a 20 or a 40-minute conversation based off of a very specific part of my capstone. Some people I know have even created little podcast series as they're looking for work as a sort of form of networking. So really taking everything that you have put all this energy into at school and seeing that actually as the foundation for content that you can put on LinkedIn. And that's going to make you feel like you're still exercising that muscle of giving back to society, and also giving you something to do that also gets attention for your job so that career momentum is not only defined as how many jobs I applied to and how many did I get a yes to. Too narrow focused, too much out of your control. This is taking something you've already done, which is your capstone, and it's just putting it out in the world in a creative and a consistent way. Definitely make that website. I love that you said I may or may not have been thinking about it. Tell me why you phrased it that way.
It's been like an ongoing mini project in the back of my head. I love traveling and exploring, and I always wanted to share that. I'm first generation. I have my family to go to college to navigate the corporate world. I wanted to share tips, and I think it's hard for me. Interesting is like I mentioned a little bit about branding, is because it's this weird thing where I feel like I struggle sharing. Like I don't want to come off as, and I've been, it's something that I'm internally trying to work with. Like I had some coaching before and they told me it's like, trying to reframe it's like it's not bragging, it's actually like you sharing your story and your power, but it's still very hard for me and I'm starting to still internally work on that, which like writing a blog requires you to put yourself out a lot, even on LinkedIn. Like even you telling me to share my capstone, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing, but it's another thing for me to like personally go through and do that because I don't, yeah, it's a little bit of that imposter syndrome creeping up, but it's also like internally feels not as natural for me.
Let's go there. I love when there's resistance, especially when it's another coach told me to do this and I haven't yet done it. I'm like, all right, I want to be the one to have the breakthrough. That's my ego talking, but I'm cool with that. All right. So your initial reaction to breaking up my capstone into like digestible content pieces, love the idea, but I know I'm going to have a lot of resistance to doing it. Really want to share my story, but then I think about actually sharing my story and then I have resistance here. Let's go to the worst case scenario. This is like my favorite thing to do today. Let's talk about all the icky, terrible feelings that are getting in the way. Act it out for me. Like, gonna jump off this call, you're gonna open up your capstone or you're gonna look at that Google Doc that you created with all of your blog ideas. What is going through your mind and your body when you are thinking about putting this online?
It's so crazy that you do know that I have a Google Doc with some blog ideas.
Of
That's
course
funny
you
too.
do. I have the same thing. Of course, we are way more similar than anyone realizes.
I think for me is I'm just like I feel like I don't know if shy is the word, but I feel shy. I feel like it's not natural. I feel like it's a bit out of there for me. I think it's just a lot of insecurities that come up from it. If it's quality, like if it's good, and I think that kind of comes up like a lot of my insecurities of feeling like, oh, maybe like this is not helpful for someone, or like why am I writing about this? Like there's a bunch of people writing about this, and it's so weird because even when I say it out loud, if my friend said that to me, I was like, but
I
it's
know.
different. It's coming from you. And but like for me internally, like I feel all those voices and it just feels not as natural for me to let's write a blog about these are the things you should bring when you travel, or these is what the things I do as a tip as like a solo travel woman, but don't feel it just doesn't come. I feel like there's so much, and I was like, oh, there's someone out there, or it doesn't feel as urgent. So I feel like, okay, I procrastinate on it and it actually never gets done, type of thing.
Mhm.
And it's also interesting because it's a personal deadline. So
Mhm.
only me know about it. And so
Mhm.
like you now and whoever's listening now know my secrets of my personal deadlines on these things. So I think that's where like easily gets swept under a rug or hey, not today, like this can be a tomorrow thing or a next week and a next week.
Right. Lots to unpack here. And I'm so glad we only have a couple more minutes because that means I have to figure this out with you so quickly. All right.
Perfect.
First thing is understanding the purpose that this has, that it gives to you, regardless of what happens with it. Because this goes on along my theme of really focusing on the things that we can command and not relying on the yes or no or the participation of others. So we're here talking about you putting something online. You putting it online means we want people to engage with it, right? That would be the goal. But we actually have to let go of that goal. It's not about other people at all. It's about you. What does the process and the experience of putting this online, so you coming up with the idea, you writing it out, you being disciplined and putting it online, right? That is the experience that you're going to now engage in. What does that bring to your life? Now, before you answer that question, however you answer, it doesn't really matter. That's how you decide if it's worth doing or not. Let me give you a quick example. I have a screenplay, more than one actually, many screenplays I've been writing over many years. And I used to really be mad at myself for not having them made into a movie, right? Not putting a lot of, energy and focus into making it into a movie. And then I had an aha moment, which is it's actually not about making the movie at all. It's about the act of writing. It's about that my brain, which is in business strategy mode for most of the day with Ladies Get Paid and my coaching business, was craving creative writing, just wanted to feel inspired. Oh my gosh, I just took all the pressure off of that experience. I still would like to make it into a movie. I still will be disappointed if I don't. But now I know that I'm actually getting a lot, not from the end goal, but from the experience, from the process of making it. So for you, you are not going to follow through on these things if you don't see or believe what the experience or the process of making them will do for you or bring to your life. Does that resonate?
Yeah, that resonates.
So there may be a reason you haven't moved forward because the act of picking the topic, writing it out, and posting it, maybe there's nothing there for you. Now, I do want to talk about the capstone for a second because regardless of what that brings to your life in the process, there is an outcome that is important, which is you need visibility to get the job. Imagining when you look at the capstone and you are about to post something online, is the predominant belief this isn't good enough or it's not helping anyone to read it? What's the most common voice in your mind that pops up for you when you think about
It's a,
posting things about your capstone?
it's a combination between maybe this is not good enough or like reflecting on my intellectualist, which is also feels funny. And then also this combination of it's cheesy, like who cares type of thing. And I know it's not true, but that's like the internal voice that I have that I'm trying to like talk back to slash push away.
Really encourage you. There's an episode that I recorded that I haven't published yet, but I'm hoping to publish it this coming week that you will listen to, where we talk a lot about dealing with internal voices. I counseled a woman who, after so many interactions she has with people at work, she thinks they don't like her, but she has no evidence for that. So it was like, how do you counsel this like negative voice, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot there. You'll take a listen to that episode. But something that could help you here is to actually create a structure for your content. That seems to be my theme here with you today, a lot of structure. It's not just coming up with like new pieces of content every time, because when you do that, you're going to talk yourself out of it. But having a kind of predetermined format to the content that you are just slotting your thoughts into. Let me give you an example. So for me, this is straightforward, but it might be something like, Dear Claire, and I'm taking snippets of things people wrote into me. Another one could be, here are 3 misconceptions and ways to think differently. Or every Thursday you post a shout out to an organization you think is doing great work. So it's coming up with a framework, a container, a structure that is pretty set, that you've decided is smart, is good, is interesting. And then you can slot your ideas into that versus putting all the energy into and all of the pressure into this one post has to be like some brilliant insight. You want to take a minute and give me a suggestion of a kind of format, structure, a container to your post that could work for you?
Yeah, that I think that's helpful because I put all this pressure on this post has to be like amazing. And
Right.
this post will have like the most whatever. And I think how can I, to your point about this framing of the structure of the content, but like how can I make it consistent? I struggle with the consistency a lot because I was like, oh, I feel very motivated. Today's the day I'd be really brave and I post this amazing thing and it does great. I posted about speaking at a conference, great. And then I fall off and I disappear for a couple months.
Yeah, I was the same. I want us to stop relying on bravery. That takes way too much. It requires too much of us. So I would say pick maybe 3, first of all, 3 categories of kinds of posts that you can get excited about. So yeah, maybe one category is a personal story, right? But maybe you only challenge yourself to post those once a month, okay? And that's fine. But you do want to be more consistent with the other ones. Another one is shout outs to other people. Another one is, again, based off of your capstone, you maybe have different sections in the capstone or so. Can we think of a way that you could present information that is interesting?
I sometimes do. What I did was like finish my fall semester. These are the highlights. And that was fun. And
That's good too. Tell me again what the main thesis is.
transforming workforce development and calling for private public partnerships.
Okay, let's focus on the transforming work. So what is that first part? What does that look like?
More investments on the job training, apprenticeship, having corporations to like see that as a return on investment. Like why is it important for them to do that? Why they should care about that? Why they should work with a community partner, nonprofit to invest into like the youth and to the workforce development.
Okay. So I am totally riffing here, but this would be an example of what I mean by creating a format for consistent posts. It could be something like you coming up with a series of pretend situations that reflect some research that you've done and saying, here was a situation that this company had or this community had or whatever. Here's my suggestion of ways that they could do it better. That might put too much pressure on you to come up with something amazing. But again, that like before and after, like situation analysis. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's great. I could see an immediate answer of, or immediate example for me was like, there's racial equity disparities after COVID. What's the answer for that? We need to invest more in diverse workforce development. And so this is related to my capstone. So it's perfect. It's related. Yes, I see what you're saying in the framework.
Oh, another one might be again, making this up because I don't know your industry specifically, but all the reasons that what you advocate for, you have to fight for funding, right? So maybe you have a
Yes.
series where you're giving people talking points for how to advocate for budget. So it's here are, and so when you look at your capstone, you're going to go, all right, what are all, I see all of the resistance that people get for, they're never able to get budget. They're always fighting for it. And every week I'm going to post a helpful hint or helpful tip for somebody to advocate for budget. So it could be like, here are 3 statistics that you can use when advocating for budget when trying to get X, Y, and Z accomplished.
I love that.
Okay, so really, I would say spend some energy now instead of coming up with all these individual posts and trying to make each one of them great. Start with one, but 3 to 5 really insightful formats for a post so that it's a lot quicker for you to then fill it in. People will gravitate towards this kind of framework that you put around the ideas. Might need a little bit more workshopping. I think I gave you a couple to get you started, but the whole thing is about let's remove pressure from the situation as best as we can so that you're not relying on this fucking, I have to be great willpower. Oh, it's too much. It's too much. This either or, I'm either posting or not posting. No,
Yeah.
we know we have to do this consistently. So the question really is, how do we make it as easeful as possible? And I think one way to do that is to shift the focus from so much the content right now to what's the container for the content, land that, experiment with it. See, all of this is an experiment, by the way, because one post you're going to write is going to go viral and the next post you write is not. Does that mean you suck? No. You're just throwing things out there. And by the way, no one really cares except for you. No one's really paying that much attention. This is not self-promotion, it's service promotion. Every single content that I put out there, when somebody reads it, it has to help them feel better, think differently, take an action, feel recognized, or whatever. Let that not put too much pressure on you, by the way. But point being is it's really not about you. Everything you put out there, it's not about you. We want you to get attention, of course, ultimately, but everybody's experiencing life in a way of what is it for me, ultimately? How does this post help me? The act of you contributing, it's not you self-promoting. It actually is you service promoting.
Wow. I thank you. That's really helpful. I really appreciate that reframe. I think I'm writing that down and I'm gonna repeat that a lot. And that's my sticky note.
Yes.
Not self-promotion, service promotion. Thank you so much. That's my sticky
Yes.
note.
Yes. And also that you're democratizing your education. Like you have the privilege of getting a master's degree in this. And there are so many people out there who didn't. Help them out. Help them out by sharing the things that you learned. And remember, it's better to have more content, but shorter. So I would rather you post 2 sentences every day than a paragraph once a month. So take the pressure off from making anything perfect because it actually is not good when it's like that. We just want it to be helpful for people in short form.
Mm,
And so if you are writing something that's quite lengthy, just stop and say, can I make this into 3 posts instead of 1?
I love
Better
that.
for you, it's better for them.
Yes, because I've been in the lane of posting lengthy things once a month, once every moon.
Oh, no, much more helpful. Because also, again, when you're posting more consistently, but shorter, you're helping more people and you're
Yeah.
also, they're busy. So it's
Yeah.
actually better for them to learn just one little aha thing or here's a statistic of the day, whatever. That's going to stick in their brain more than a long post and more people will be helped because of it. And then you'll build something out of this that you'll then use as part of your job seeker story. And that's what's so wonderful about really taking command of what your life is now instead of waiting. You have more to say in how you experience your life than I think even you realize. Thank you so much for being here. Any final thoughts you want to share as we close out? I think this is going to resonate with a lot of people.
Oh, I really appreciate that. I feel like we really got to the juicy part and it really hit home and resonate a lot. And I feel very empowered and inspired to tackle this way. And I really appreciate your reframe and perspective a lot. Thank
Yay.
you.
Thank
Okay.
you.